My name is Leo. I'm 32, and my official job title is Freelance UI UX Designer, which is a fancy way of saying I spend most of my days in sweatpants, arguing with clients about why the color Cerulean Dream is a terrible choice for a buy now button. My life was a symphony of comfortable mediocrity, punctuated by the distant drone of a lawnmower and the beep of a microwave. And then they showed up. The first time they knocked was on a Tuesday night around 11. I was at peak performance, sprawled on the couch, binge-watching a trashy reality show about competitive dog grooming, and trying to get the last crumbs of flamin' hot Cheetos out of the bag by tilting it directly into my mouth. The knock was 3 distinct, weirdly formal raps. Knock, knock, knock. I groaned, pausing the show on a poodle sculpted into the shape of the Statue of Liberty. Who the hell delivers an Amazon package at this hour? I muttered. I shuffled to the door and peered through the peephole. And that's when my brain short-circuited, trying to process the sheer absurdity of the scene. 3 figures, standing stock still under the weak yellow glow of my porch light. Their outfits looked like someone tried to stage a school play on ghosts on a $0 budget. They wore billowy white robes and the pièce de résistance, tall, pointed, triangular white hats. They looked like members of the KKK who had renounced racism to start a minimalist catering company. Or maybe the ghosts from A Christmas Carol, if it were directed by a very confused film student. Their faces, visible beneath the brims, were completely, alarmingly serious. I hesitated, torn between pretending I was dead and opening the door to see what this particular brand of circus was selling. Curiosity, the same impulse that once made me ask a woman if she was pregnant when she was, in fact, just not one out. I sighed, undid the lock, but kept the security chain on. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to suppress a smirk. The one in the middle, an old man with a face like carved granite and eyes that could suck the soul out of a tax auditor, took a step forward. "Greetings," he said, his voice a flat, robotic monotone. "We are here to bring you the truth." "The truth?" I raised an eyebrow. "Sorry, pal, I ordered a large pepperoni, not a large-scale existential crisis. I think you've got the wrong house." He was unfazed. "We are not mistaken, O chosen one. We are the disciples of the immutable plane. We are here to inform you. The earth is flat." I was silent for a full 5 seconds while my brain tried to reboot. Was this a prank show? Was I being punked? Had I inhaled too much of my pumpkin spice-scented candle? Finally, I couldn't hold it in. I laughed, a loud, gut-busting, tear-forming laugh. "Flat! Holy hell, guys! It's the 21st century! You want to come in and use the Wi-Fi? The password is "The Earth is round 1, 2, 3." Just a thought.
"The laughter of the ignorant," a woman next to him muttered. Her voice was shrill and judgmental, as if I'd just admitted to enjoying pineapple on pizza. The head honcho, I'd decided to call him that, remained stoic. It is not only flat, it is shrinking. Every day the edges of the world crumble away into the great nothing. The land is running out. The living space is receding. "Oh, right," I nodded, feigning understanding. "That explains the insane property taxes in this neighborhood. It's a literal supply and demand problem. Makes sense." He ignored my sarcasm. "And you, Leo, are the chosen one. It is your destiny. You must make a great pilgrimage to the edge and offer yourself willingly. Your sacrifice will slow the recession, buying time for the rest of humanity. You will be our savior."
I stared at them. The deranged sincerity in their eyes was staggering. They actually believed this. This was no longer just funny. It was tipping into the territory of weirdly sad. I said, "Look, I appreciate the offer, really. Being humanity's savior sounds way better than employee of the month, but I'm going to have to pass. I've got several seasons of the Great British Bake Off to get through, and my cat, Chairman Meow, has separation anxiety. Who's going to feed him his specific brand of salmon pâté?" The head honcho said, his voice gaining a slight, menacing edge. "It is your destiny." I said, "Well, my destiny just texted. It's tired and wants to go to bed. You guys have a great night. Try not to get a ticket from the HOA for loitering after 10 p.m. With that, I shut the door and slid both deadbolts into place. I heard them linger for a moment, then their footsteps faded. I shook my head and returned to my grotesquely shaved dogs on TV. "Freaking weirdos," I mumbled. "Probably a new age cult trying to meet their recruitment quota." But they came back the next night. Same time, same 3 formal knocks, same ridiculous outfits and dead serious faces. This time I didn't open the door. I just yelled through it. "The chosen one is doing his laundry. Try again tomorrow." I heard the head honcho's monotone voice drift through the wood. "Your procrastination costs the world another foot of land, Leo. The cries of the displaced will haunt your conscience." I said, "I'm wearing my Bose noise-canceling headphones, so I think I'll be fine." This became our nightly routine. Their persistence was incredible, almost admirable in its insanity. I started preparing one-liners for them. "Hey, disciples," I'd say through the chained door. "Got a philosophical question for you. If the earth is flat, why am I fat in a round sort of way?" Silence. "How about this?" I'd continue. "If I jump off the edge, is there good cell service down there? I need to update my Facebook status to feeling gravity at the edge of the world with the pointy-hatted weirdos." The shrill woman would snap, "Your blasphemy will not save you." "No, but it keeps me entertained." I told my best friend, Jake, about it. Jake was a software engineer, a man who worshipped at the altar of logic, data, and overpriced single-origin coffee. He laughed so hard over the phone I thought he was going to have an aneurysm. "Dude, are you sure you didn't accidentally take mushrooms?" he wheezed. "This sounds like a rejected script for a Coen Brothers movie. The Wish.com Illuminati?" "I swear to God," I said. "They are deadly serious. I'm thinking of getting a Ring camera just to post the footage on TikTok. Title it, 'Trying to Unsubscribe from the Apocalypse.'" "Do it," Jake said. "You'll go viral. The saint of sarcastic cult repellent. But seriously, man, be careful. Zealots aren't exactly known for their sense of humor." "Please," I scoffed. "They're harmless. They look like they could be taken out by a strong gust of wind." Oh, the sweet, beautiful ignorance of my past self. My sense of humor began to run dry in the second week. The nightly visits were no longer a quirky anecdote. They were an invasive, sleep-depriving nuisance. My productivity plummeted. I became perpetually irritable. One night I'd had enough. No more jokes. When they knocked, I threw the door wide open. "All right, that's it," I snarled. "What the hell do you people want from me? Money? Is that it? Tell me the number. I'll write you a check to make you disappear." The head honcho looked at me, his deep-set eyes devoid of emotion. "We do not want your fleeting currency. We require your eternal sacrifice." "Listen to me," I said, starting to pace like a caged animal. "I'm going to say this one last time. The Earth is a sphere. It orbits the sun. We have satellites. We have GPS. We have pictures from the International Space Station. Neil Armstrong walked on the goddamn moon, not the goddamn dinner plate. A third grader knows this. What dark corner of the internet did you people crawl out of?" I unleashed every half-remembered fact from my high school physics class. I talked about gravity, the curved horizon, time zones, circumnavigation. I gave an impassioned, finger-jabbing speech, feeling like an angry Bill Nye. When I finished, breathless, they just stared at me. Their silence was more unnerving than their crazy talk. Finally, the head honcho spoke, his voice still flat, but the words drilled into my skull. "Are you sure?" Just 3 words, but they vaporized my confidence. "Sure? Sure about what?" I stammered. "Are you sure about any of that? Have you personally seen the Earth as a globe from space? Or have you only seen images provided to you by NASA, a government agency? Have you performed the calculations yourself? Or are you just repeating what a textbook told you? You place your faith in science, but to you, science is just another belief system. You trust scientists you've never met and equations you don't understand. How, in the end, is your faith any different from ours?" I stood there frozen. His words were a kind of logical acid, slowly dissolving the foundation of a reality I had always taken for granted. Of course I hadn't been to space. Of course my knowledge was second-hand. But it was the truth. Everyone knew it was the truth. "Don't let them gaslight you, man," Jake said over the phone the next night.
It's a classic epistemological attack. They aren't proving they're right. They're just trying to make you doubt what you know. Ignore them, Leo. They'll get bored and go find some other sucker to be their chosen one. I hoped he was right, but a seed of doubt had been planted. A creeping dread that my world wasn't as solid as I thought. The old man's question echoed in my head. Are you sure? A week later, Jake called me. The humor was gone from his voice. Dude, those clowns, they're here, at my apartment building. I went cold. What? How? How did they find you? I have no idea. Must have followed you or something. They're wearing the same stupid ghost costumes, saying the exact same script. Flat Earth, shrinking world, except for one new detail. Now the chosen one is both of us. They're calling us the Couple of Hope. Couple of Hope? I nearly choked. We sound like a cheesy Hallmark movie. I told them to get lost or I'd call security. They just left. But this is creepy, Leo. This is organized. Our phone calls were no longer filled with laughter. We became reluctant conspiracy theorists, comparing notes, analyzing the cult's words. We tried to reassure each other that it was all just an elaborate, insane prank. But deep down, we both felt the fear taking root. It grew in the dark, in the silent pauses on the phone, in the sound of the steady, nightly knock on the door. That tree of fear was about to bear its terrible fruit on a fateful Friday night, 3 weeks after it all began.
That night, a hellacious storm rolled over Ohio. Rain lashed the windows like handfuls of gravel. The wind howled to the eaves with a mournful, human-like sound. Lightning split the sky, illuminating my backyard in strobes of ghastly blue light. It was the perfect night to be curled up watching a horror movie. The only problem was my life had become one, and I was the main character who was about to make a series of very poor decisions. The cult didn't show up. It was the first night in 3 weeks they were a no-show. Their absence, ironically, was more terrifying than their presence. It was the silence of a predator in the tall grass. I kept checking my Ring camera feed. Nothing. Just the white sheet of rain and the impenetrable dark. Around 1 a.m., my phone rang. It was Jake. I snatched it up. Jake, you okay? Did they show up at your place? There was a pause on the other end, filled with the sound of ragged breathing and a strange, high-pitched noise like wind whistling through a narrow crack. Jake, I said again, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. Talk to me, man. Leo, Jake's voice came through, but it wasn't his voice. It was thin, broken, and filled with a kind of pure, crystalline terror I had never heard before. Run. Just run, Leo. Get out. Run where? What's happening? I yelled, jumping to my feet. Did they do something to you? Not them, he gasped, his voice distorted by the escalating shriek of wind. It's real. Oh God, Leo, it's real. What the hell is real? Spell it out, Jake. I heard a tremendous crack
Over the phone, the sound of something massive snapping in two. The sound of the wind suddenly became deafening. The ground, Leo, the earth, it's flat. And it's... Ah! His scream was cut off, abruptly. It was replaced by a long, drawn-out whoosh, the sound of a colossal vacuum sucking the air out of the world. And then, dead silence. "Jake! Jake!" I screamed into the dead phone.
Nothing. Just the sterile, final silence of a disconnected call. I frantically redialed over and over. "The number you have dialed is not in service." The automated voice had never sounded so cruel. I called his parents. They hadn't heard from him. He lived alone in a high-rise downtown. I collapsed onto the floor, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. The storm outside seemed to be mocking me. Jake's final scream, the sound of the wind, his broken words, "It's actually flat?" No, it couldn't be. The cult must have gotten to him, kidnapped him, forced him to say those things, to terrorize me. Yes, that was the only logical explanation, the only one that kept my world from shattering. But a dark, primal part of my brain screamed that Jake wasn't lying. The terror in his voice was not something you could fake. I didn't sleep. I sat huddled in my living room, clutching my phone, staring at the empty camera feed. I was afraid of the cult coming back, but I was more afraid that they wouldn't. Their disappearance and Jake's were connected in some horrible way I didn't dare contemplate. The next morning, I reported Jake missing to the police. They took my statement, including the story about the weird cult. I could see the mixture of pity and suspicion in the officer's eyes. So, a cult in white robes and pointy hats told you the earth was flat and your friend vanished after a strange phone call during the storm. Okay, sir, we'll look into it. His tone told me my file was heading straight for the cabinet marked weirdos and potential crank calls. The following days were a hazy nightmare. I lived in a fog of fear and paranoia. Every creak of the house made me jump. I didn't leave. I ordered groceries from Instacart and food from DoorDash with a note in all caps, "Leave at door and go. Do not knock." The world outside my front door had become alien and hostile. And then, on the third night after Jake vanished, they returned. This time there were only two of them, the head honcho and the shrill woman. The third disciple was gone. His absence was as ominous as Jake's. I watched them on the camera feed. They just stood there, silent statues. They didn't knock. Their silence was heavier than any words. It was a cold, smug declaration. We told you so. Do you believe us now? I didn't dare open the door. I sat inside, my heart pounding, a cold sweat on my brow, feeling their gaze penetrate the wood and drywall to pin me in place. The silent standoff lasted for an hour before they turned and left. This became the new routine. They'd arrive, stand in judgment,
and leave. The psychological torture had been refined to a new, exquisite level. They didn't need to speak anymore. Jake's absence spoke for them. I started noticing things, small, strange things I would have dismissed before. A slight, almost imperceptible tilt to the floor, just enough for a pen on my desk to slowly roll off. I started hearing a sound, a low, intermittent hum, seeming to emanate from deep underground, the thrum of some vast, tired machine. The sky looked wrong. The sunsets were unnaturally vibrant, stained with streaks of violet and sickly green. The clouds seemed to hang in the air, motionless. Was I losing my mind? Was the stress and sleep deprivation causing full-blown psychosis? I tried to cling to logic. The house settling, a distant factory, air pollution. There's always a rational explanation.
Always, right? Are you sure? The head honcho's question echoed in my head, and this time I had no answer. I plunged into the dark corners of the internet, a place I had once mocked. I read the Flat Earth forums, watched hours of conspiracy videos. Before, it was comedy. Now I saw a terrifying, unshakable conviction. What if, in this insane universe, they were the only ones who saw the truth? No, I shook my head, trying to clear it. Get a grip, Leo. But one night, as they stood their silent vigil, I did something I never thought I would. I opened the door. The head honcho and the woman looked at me. Their faces were as blank as ever, but for a split second, I saw something in the old man's eyes. Pity. He said, his voice flat. Your friend, he didn't make it. The piece of land he was on, the edge of his apartment building, it broke off before he could run. The blood in my veins turned to ice. What did you do to him? I whispered. We did nothing, the woman said, her shrill voice like a hiss. It is the law of a dying world. He saw the truth in his final moments. It was a mercy. The truth? I asked. Yes, the head honcho continued. And now your time is short. This land is very near the edge. Your sacrifice now means more than ever. You could save this house, this street, perhaps this entire town for a little while longer. I stared at them, not with sarcasm, not with anger, but with absolute, bottomless terror. They weren't just crazy. They were prophets of a waking nightmare. What do I have to do? The question fell out of my mouth before I could stop it. The head honcho gave a slow, solemn nod. Go east. Just walk. Walk until you can walk no more. You will see it, the edge of the world. Take the leap of faith, O chosen one. Your sacrifice will be remembered in the annals of the survivors. They turned and vanished into the darkness.
I shut the door, my back against it, and slid to the floor. Go east? Jump? Was this real, or was this the ultimate, most insane gaslighting in human history? I didn't know what to believe anymore. My reality had been shredded. I only knew one thing for sure. I did not want to die. I decided to run. Not east, west. As far west as I could get. I'd get in my car, hit I-70, and I wouldn't stop until I hit the Pacific Ocean. I'd drive until I ran out of land in the opposite direction. I scrambled to my room, throwing clothes, my wallet, passport, and my dad's old Colt 1911 into a backpack. I never thought I'd touch it, but in this new, insane world, it felt like the only solid thing I owned. I was ready to go. I just had to wait for the sun to rise. But I never got the chance.
That night, sleep was a foreign country. I sat on the sofa, the cold steel of the pistol in my lap, my go-bag at my feet. I watched the window, praying for the first hint of dawn, like a condemned man praying for a pardon. The low hum from beneath the earth was no longer intermittent. It was a constant, deep growl, the sound of a great beast stirring in its sleep. Around 4 a.m., it began. The ground lurched. This wasn't an earthquake. I'd felt tremors before. This was different. It didn't shake side to side or up and down. It was a sickening spasm, a convulsion of the planet itself. It felt like I was standing on the skin of a living creature in its death throes. Everything in my house started to slide. Dishes crashed in the cabinets. Books tumbled from the shelves. The paintings on the walls all tilted in the same direction. I gripped the sofa, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. The lurching grew more violent. The growl from below became a deafening, grinding screech, the sound of bedrock being torn apart. I forced myself to look out the window. And that's when I saw it. The Hendersons' house next door, the one I always complained about for leaving their Christmas decorations up until March, was gone. Not collapsed, not destroyed. It had simply ceased to exist. In its place, where their neatly manicured lawn used to be, was a chasm. A perfectly clean, sharp cut in the fabric of the world. And on the other side of the cut was nothing.
Not darkness. Darkness is the absence of light. It's still something. This was the absence of everything. The great nothing. A void that was not black, but a color my eyes couldn't process. It was a graphics glitch in reality, a hole in the source code of the universe. Staring into it felt like my own mind was being unspooled, dissolved into non-existence. The planet screamed. Another crack raced down my street, then another, right along the side of my house. The drywall in my living room spider-webbed, plaster dust raining down. I had to run, now. I grabbed my bag and the gun and bolted for the front door. I didn't care about west or east anymore.
I just had to get out of this collapsing box. I threw the door open, and they were there. Not two, a crowd, 20, maybe 30 of them, all in their white robes and pointed hats. They stood in a human wall, blocking my only exit. Their faces, illuminated by the flickering porch light, were placid and inhumanly calm. They were silent ghosts, the gatekeepers of the end. I saw the head honcho and the woman in the front. He looked at me no longer with pity, but with a cold, final satisfaction. "It is time, chosen one." His voice boomed over the roar of the dying earth. "Do not fight it. Embrace your destiny." "I get out of my way," I shrieked, my voice cracking with terror. "You're all insane. We're all going to die." The ground beneath me gave another violent heave. I stumbled, nearly falling. The chasm beside my house was now only a few feet away. I could feel the cold, empty wrongness of the void radiating from it.
"Death is not an end," the shrill woman intoned like a high priestess. "It is a transition. Your sacrifice will nourish the land that remains. Your blood will be the mortar that binds the crumbling world." They weren't moving. They didn't attack me. They didn't push me. They just stood there, an immovable wall of flesh, giving me only one choice: stay here and fall. "Please," I begged, tears of sheer panic streaming down my face. "I don't want to die. I want to live." Desperation swallowed my last shred of reason. My hand tightened on the pistol. The cold metal was the only real thing left in this nightmare. "Last chance," I snarled, raising the gun. "Move, or I'll shoot." The crowd remained silent. No one flinched. Their faces were serene masks. Death meant nothing to them. "They will not move," the head honcho said. "They have seen the truth. They are honored to accompany you." Their collective insanity broke me. My control snapped. Bang! The gunshot was deafening. One of the disciples, a young man directly in front of me, crumpled backward. A dark hole appeared in his white robe. There was no blood, just an empty spot. He hit the ground without a sound. The crowd did not react. No screams, no panic. They merely glanced at their fallen comrade and then looked back at me, their eyes as placid as a still lake. Their indifference was more terrifying than any violence. It made my actions meaningless. Bang! I shot a second one. A woman. She fell just as silently. Bang! Bang! I fired wildly into the crowd, no longer aiming, just trying to blast a path and escape. But they just stood there, absorbing the bullets, falling in silence, while others remained unmoving. And then I heard it, a final titanic crack that seemed to come from directly beneath my feet. The lurching stopped, the ground was gone. There was a sudden stomach-plummeting drop, a feeling of absolute weightlessness. My porch, the cultists, the flickering streetlight, everything was falling. I was falling into the void. There was no rush of wind because there was no air. There was no sensation of cold or heat because there was no temperature. There was only a silent, endless freefall in absolute nothingness. Around me, the white-robed figures were following too. Their robes fluttered in a non-existent wind. They weren't screaming. They weren't afraid. As we tumbled through the emptiness, I locked eyes with the head honcho. He was looking at me, and he was smiling. A serene, fulfilled smile of a man whose prophecy had come true. They were right. The earth was flat, and it was shrinking.
My sacrifice, willing or not, had been made. I had jumped, and I hadn't jumped alone. I had taken my shepherds with me. Together we fell, and fell, and fell. In the great nothing, time had no meaning. A second, a century, I couldn't tell. Slowly my senses began to dissolve. I could no longer see the white shapes. I could no longer feel my own body. My thoughts started to fray, my memories bleeding away like watercolor in the rain. Leo. My name was Leo. I lived in a house in Ohio. I had a friend named Jake. I used to laugh at the people in white robes. The last pieces of my identity were crumbling into static. I am falling. We are falling. And in the infinite void, there is no bottom. There is no anything. There is only the fall. And then even the falling was gone.